Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something on the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. If you're enjoying the conversations here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching or listening. Or if you or somebody you know would like to come on and have a chat with me, feel free to reach out to me on the social media platform that you use. The easiest way to find the ones that I am on is if you go to isaacl.dev. That'll take you to a list of all the different places that I am. All right. So with that, I'm looking forward to this conversation. We were having a great talk before we got started about a bunch of different things, and I'm looking forward to continuing that conversation. So my guest today is Kohsuke Kawaguchi. Kohsuke, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Kohsuke. Nice to meet you, and thanks for getting my pronunciation right. I know that's no easy feat, and I can go by KK if that's easier for you too.
KK? That's
So,
that's
yeah,
cool. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. No, do you want to introduce yourself?
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I guess I've been in the tech space for a good long while. For the past maybe 20 years or so, I've been focused more and more on the DevOps and software, like
Sure.
engineering productivity stuff. I'm probably best known as a guy who created Jenkins, but I'd like to think there's more to me than just that. But hopefully we get to cover some of those. And then right now I'm head of AI at CloudBees. So, still doing the DevOps space, but the new twist.
Yeah, no, yeah, I like it how you just simply say I might be known as the guy who created Jenkins, which is kind of a funny way to phrase that. Um, so I think we're going to talk about a lot of things in the DevOps space and the AI space, so I'm looking forward to it. But one of the things that I want to learn from you is how you got started. Like, when did you realize technology was like the thing for you?
Yeah, let's see. So I'm 40, I'm 48. So like people my age, at least in Japan. So I grew up in Japan, and now the past the technology was back then. There was this like a paper magazine that was out every month, and people were posting their little program, essentially all games, and then we
Okay.
all typed it into our own computers just so that we can play games.
Yeah, yeah.
And then in the process of reading this page and typing it exactly in, like you actually learn to program. It's kind of amazing it works
Yeah.
that way, but it really does. Yeah, so that's how I got into it. It's in junior high school, I think. Yeah, I just wanted to play a video game, and then I
Yeah,
type it in. Yeah.
it is kind of funny how and I am very guilty of this too because I think I was introduced like to technology via video games or gaming in general. That how many of us were like, "Oh, like building video games is fun." But I haven't talked to very many people that continue that story into actually being a game
Mm.
developer. Because I think that people
Mm.
realize that being a game developer is like really hard. Um, so I don't know. Man, I need to find some people that to be on the show that are game developers that can tell me that it's not as hard as I think it probably is. So
Yeah.
so you went through the route that I think a lot of people are familiar with, where there was a publication or something that kind of had code for you to kind of type out, and as you type that code, you learned it. Um, like when did you realize that it was the thing that like that kind of I don't want to say like you obsessed over, but it kind of took over a mind of its own, and you realized like I want to like have a career in this.
Yeah, I think so maybe it was around high school I started. So there was this, I guess the maybe you can call it the scene. Like it was a thing for individual developers to build the software and then sell it. We called it back then shareware. I
Yeah.
guess today's version, it's like a close to the, I guess, the iPhone App Store type deal. Like individuals could create a little city apps, and then they have a payment system and all that stuff, and you can sell it like $3 a pop or something like that. And then so I was looking at those, and I did enjoy programming, and I was writing tools and software that I was using by myself. And so I thought, oh, I could put it up there, and then if that makes money, that's great. And it was very easy, like very no upfront investment needed, right? And I felt like that's something I could do, and I started doing that in high school, and then I was feeling good, and went from there. So it was just yeah, very natural path in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if you're this kind of individual, but like I've always been like naturally curious about how things work. And I think that technology is very it's very approachable in that way where you can like you look at any application that you use today, and I'm very guilty of like, okay, I immediately start thinking about it from like a developer's perspective, like, okay, how does it actually work? Like, what does the front end look like? What does the back end look like? Um, are you kind of curious in that same way too, where you'll see something and you kind of like need to understand how it works, like even not into the technology
Yeah,
space, but in other spaces as well?
yeah, exactly. Like, as I said, like some people enjoy tinkering, and I was very much like that. And it just so happens that my subject to the
Yeah,
tinkering that stuff that I had easy access to was not a car riding around in my garage. It's just a computer sitting because my mother bought one, like a computer, and she was using it for word processing and stuff. But during the day, it was just there. So I was like, I could, it turned out that I could play with it. And let's say like one day my school buddy is gonna tell me about the trigonometry functions like cosines and sines. I
yeah,
was like, whoa, these guys know this cool stuff. And next thing I know, like, okay, how can I use this thing? And then there's this little 3D graphics and wireframe rendering of a sphere, and I was like, oh, this is fascinating. I need to
yeah,
program this. It was, it's just a standard tinkering stuff. So I'm very
yeah.
much in that sense curious. Yeah.
So was that like the first program that you actually wrote was something like around that space? Like, do you remember like the very first thing that you wrote, like by yourself, like
Um,
not copying something from the mail or from a newspaper, but like something that you sat down and you just started typing and it turned into a thing?
I don't. Yeah, well, that's a great question. I don't. I think that maybe this is an Asian line of thinking, but like there's this notion that you start by copying and then you
Sure, sure.
intentionally like break apart, like do the antithesis or whatever your master was telling you, and then you find a nice medium in between. So to me, like the copying is actually a very like in some sense the tinkering starts at that point. Like I
Yeah.
remember like typing the video game in and then start hacking it right away because
Yes.
like you oh, what if this thing could jump? And so it's just yeah, I don't know if the what's from scratch. Yeah, I don't know. I don't. MEOs, yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I can,
No,
yeah.
no, I think it's something that happens in the West too. Like especially if somebody's like trying to learn a new technology. Like everybody's done like the Hello World application, right? Like
Mm.
Hello World, like it starts off as like a framework or a template, and then you kind of can build on that. Or you'll find like nowadays, it's crazy because you can just like literally like Google search like anything and then find a GitHub repo that has that thing that you're trying to build. And it might not be the exact thing that you're looking for, but depending on its licensing, you could just fork it and then make some modifications to it. And then look, you have exactly what you want. And you did like 2% of the work instead of 100% of the work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's always some like some new ingredients, like some new angle that you're bringing into
Yeah.
whatever change of the program you're making. So, yeah. So is the boundary between new and the improvements is kind of is blurry to me. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, one thing that's always fascinating to me too, and this is one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, you know, we've come to this point in technology where like open source or like the idea of like sharing software is like very much like it's in the forefront, like even to the extent that like if you talk to a developer and they're fairly well known and they don't have like a GitHub, like and in like they don't exist on GitHub or they don't have a bunch of repos, you kind of like what are you as a developer, like you kind of judge people based on their developer social media platform. um like you were talking about like shareware and stuff back in the day, which is like kind of like the I guess the first one of the first inceptions of this idea of like reusing software and giving around. Like was that kind of the would you think that is like your first introduction to like quote unquote open source, like sharing software with others, like even if it's something that you're building for yourself, but maybe other people can take advantage of it?
No, I guess I didn't think so. Back then, I didn't think of it as anywhere near open source. In fact, the source code was closely guarded secret
Sure.
because like we are all selling the resulting software, right? So in many ways, like that wasn't so it wasn't helping me see. I could see what the software other people are producing, but I couldn't see how they put that together. So on that front, maybe my first encounter is like a PC, a computer club in my high school. There was so we had this library inside the club. It was just a Crude GUI toolkit, and so maybe that was the first exposure exposure where I get to see how other people are writing programs. And then that it give me some thoughts about, oh, like that's how you do it, or I wouldn't do it that way, etc. So maybe that's the closest encounter to open source in the early days. And it really had to wait until 2000s when I guess the Linux kind of came along and the word open source became a thing. And back then, like I was in the Microsoft ecosystem, so this whole notion of software being free is kind of alien to me. But I was like, okay, this sounds interesting, and so we did a hobby program and we put it out there, and then that kind of was our first foray into open source.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is very interesting, especially when you talk to people that were so familiar with how Microsoft did business, 20 years ago. And now you look at Microsoft now and they're not nowhere close to the same company from like a open source perspective and like an adoption of Linux perspective. So it's quite fascinating in that space.
Yeah.
This is my favorite question to ask people. When did you realize that there was not that there was a career in tech, but there was money? Like that you can make money, like good money, like building this software that you actually were just building for fun of it.
As I mentioned, I was sitting Sharon, and like I could make the kind of money that like never otherwise possible. So I was like, oh, like, it's so easy, and I can, like I could, if I bring along a few more friends to scale it up, maybe this would be something. So that was the one moment, and then maybe like a next key moment was when I had this like irresistible job offer from Sun Microsystems in the Bay Area, and I was like, okay, I guess, Americans pay a wholly different. I mean, in the Silicon Valley, they pay a wholly different level of back then at least the pay, and so I was like, whoa, that's fascinating. I gotta move there, and it sounds like a fun place to be, America. So that was maybe another opportunity. Yeah.
So you went to university and then you were hired by Sun right out of college then?
No, so I in college I started my own company. So at high school I was in the solo, and I was like, okay, I could see myself like scaling this up a little bit, and then so I invited the friends, and we had a company, and then we, 5 or 6 of us, and we rented a place near the university and had fun, and it was made enough money to keep going. And then I kept that for a while after college, I think a year or two. And I started feeling like I could do this. I know I can do this now. And then, but this, this thing from Sun, like it was Silicon Valley. I knew like that is a, like a holy place in our space. And I guess my mother always kind of told me like, you need to go study abroad. And I was like, screw you, like, I want to do what I want to do. But I guess it must have left some the thoughts in the back of my head that maybe I need to go out from Japan, and so I felt like that was the right opportunity. And so that's that's how I came over to the US, knowing really little what to expect. Yeah.
So you came to the US, I'm guessing, for like post grad work. So like you did like you got like a bachelor's in Japan, and then you came over to the US for like post grad work.
So I did a college in Tokyo, and then around that time I got involved into this, I guess, the effort by so one people, what's a good example? It's like VHS versus beta. Right? Is that too old? Like
no. It tracks. It tracks.
Somebody is trying to build a competing technological standard back then around the XML. And then I could see that was like mathematically more elegant and beautiful than everything. And then the prevailing standard that's pushed by Microsoft and IBM and so on, they're like a pretty crap. So I was involved in the rebellion, and then that effort got was noticed by some. I'm sure some like backside conversations with the leader of this rebellion that looks like a hey, you at Microsystem, bring in this guy, and then let him do his work, and then you etc. So I was hired to build this specific open source technology aiding that rebellion. And Sun,
Oh,
I think,
okay.
was trying to enter, maybe, yeah. So the part of the grand, like, intergalactic play of the politics, and I was just
Sure.
a soldier.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the reason why I was curious about like going to school in Japan and then going to school in the US, I was curious like what is it like what was that like for you, the transition of, I'm guessing that computer science curriculums in the US versus Japan, they're probably very similar, but I imagine there's probably some things that when you first started going to school in the US that you were kind of taken aback by. Um, because I could just
Uh,
imagine, like from a cultural perspective, like Japan versus the U.S. is very different, right? But like I'd imagine, like from I'm doing my master's in computer science in the U.S. Like I'd imagine that was a bit of a different experience for you as well.
yeah. So just to make sure, I got hired by Sun. Like, I didn't do
Yeah.
so the postgraduate. I did eventually go to a graduate school,
Oh, okay.
but
Okay. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a bit of back. But yeah. So the timeline was the reverse. But to your point, um, I guess I was surprised in the master's program that I went. There's a lot more people in the industry. Like, they're more closer to the, like, a work, the real industry, as opposed to the academia. Whereas the college that I went in Tokyo, like, most people went from that straight to at least masters, and then some half of them to PhD. That was very much like, like a science. It wasn't the engineering that the way I think about it. So that was different, at least in the program I went to
Yeah.
Cornell. So yeah.
So at this point in time in your life, you got this great offer from Sun to build this interesting sort of technology. Like, what were some of the problems that were trying to be solved that when you first encountered them, you didn't even realize these were things that existed? Like, because one of the things that then the reason I'll give you an example. Like, so I went to college. I didn't get a computer science degree. I got an information systems degree. And my first job out of college was at an insurance company. And I just didn't realize, like, I'd never been introduced to like the mainframe or like Fortran or COBOL. And
Mhm.
when first day, like I see like all of these people that are building like, with this sort of technology. And I just assumed because, I learned Java, I learned C Sharp, I learned Ruby in college. It dates me from like how old I am. So I assumed that like every business like built Java apps or C Sharp apps or Ruby apps, right? And then you come in and people are building like apps that have been around for 30 years. It was very interesting to me. Like, what are some like things like when you first started working in tech that I guess assumptions that you had made that were proven completely wrong, like day one or day two?
Yeah, well, I mean, the coming to America to work for Sun, doing this XML standard work was like
Yeah.
changing everything. So in that sense, like, I really came without knowing what to expect. I guess, when you're young, you're like clueless anyway. So it's
And
like,
you're just happy to be there too, right? Like you're just so excited to have a job.
yeah, it was just like a whole new world, and I loved that. And then, the thing, what was great about some back then in the standard work is, like, in many ways, like, there is no customer. Like,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
all geeks from different companies coming together to build a technical standard. And so whenever we say it's ready, we ship this, and like, there was no deadline, there was no nothing. Like, we could just build the thing that we wanted. And just so that was, I mean, too good. I was like, wow, this is too good to be true. And it was too good to be true because the company went down the tube pretty soon after. But
Sure.
it's just, yeah. But I mean, it's maybe that, like, a one. And I didn't really have appreciation back then about it. I was in many ways, like, I was naive, and it was a technical standards. I was like, okay, we just need to build the best possible technological
Yeah.
solutions. And the reality of these standard places is so much more than that. It's like a
Yeah.
diplomacy work. So I originally, like, so many people, I had no idea what the fuck they're doing, and like, what value
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
bringing to the table. Like, they're playing actually more important game than writing a little program. But it
It's
was only
it's
much. Yeah.
it is funny because like I mean I was thinking about that as well. Like standards work is so interesting to me because like you said, it's like all these different companies have come in and they have all differing opinions because they're all they're very biased in what they're looking for out of whatever
Right.
technology is being standardized, right? And I'd imagine like the reason why I'm curious about this is because like you think of something like XML that has been around for so long, right? 25 years or however long XML's been around for.
Yeah.
And like you start thinking of is like what are the conversations like when you're starting to build something that the goal is for it to be around for 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
and I think the overarching question that I have is like when you think of XML today, is it anything like the XML that you folks were thinking about as you were building the standards?
I think there's always, I mean, these standards happen in the interesting context. It's almost like this industry-wide heat or enthusiasm
Yeah.
that, like, this thing, if we do things right, then can create, well, back then in case of XML, it's like an interoperable the business systems talking to each other, like a machine to machine, having conversations, stuff like that. And so, yeah, I think there is definitely that excitement. And in many ways, like what I loved about that sort of standard field is like as an individual, like yeah, at the same like what you do represent a company, and there's some interest that you have to represent, but you also know that you if this whole bunch of geeks in the same group can come
Yeah.
together, like we have a real shot at like a changing the industry or even the world. So yeah, I think people involved in XML are quite proud of the accomplishment that they made. I mean, it's like it did make it's like it did create a whole generation of the tech. It's like nowadays it's all in the past, but yeah.
So you did that standardization work, and then you started and obviously you can probably correct me what the real story is, but you started to make this transit like you were always building. It seems to me like you've always kind of built tools for developers, right? Or tools for technologists to be more successful. Like standards work is part of that too, right? So like when did you get into the DevOps space? Like when did you realize that there was like a need for like good tooling around getting, shipping code faster, building code faster? Like when did you like get interested in that space?
Yeah, so I mean, so as you said, I think there are two types of. I mean, there are certain types of engineers that keep going lower and lower down the technical stack.
Sure.
I guess I suppose I'm one of those people. That the reason I was working in the Sun and doing this like a standard, what the people are building up top is already the beginning. And so in some sense, like for me, so those are not the tools. It's a library, the technology, the
Yeah.
standard. But like to me, it's not that different from let's say creating a tool that we'd use. So I was building like lots of homegrown tools like that, and I suppose it helped. I guess somehow this one. I mean, I was producing lots of products left and right, but this one somehow got a little more traction among my team, I guess, and then so they used it. I deployed it for them. What eventually became Jenkins, like deployed it
Yeah.
there and it kept improving. And so yeah, so just you just let these little tractions and like a
Yeah.
little delight kind of leads you. Yeah.
And
So
so this we're talking about like kind of before Jenkins when it was still Hudson, right? Like was it
yeah.
was it basically like it got ton of adoption inside the company and then there was a realization like oh this might be a commercial software.
So it did get tons of adoption in my particular floor. I still
Oh,
remember
okay.
the building is called Santa Clara 14. It's like, I don't know, maybe 30 engineers or so working on the similar stuff. And, your team starts using it and we all having a lunch together from time to time. And then we tell them about what I'm doing and kind of start to grow from there. But for the longest time, it was just like a mini hacking and that this particular team using just maybe 2-3 years like that.
Okay.
And then yeah, I suspect a part of the story is like this is around the time as Sun was just continuing to like a layoff after layoff every half a
Yeah.
year or
Yeah. Yeah.
something like that. And people are leaving the company to a different place and they take the knowledge, the way of
Sure.
work. And so I suspect some of them took this, hey, like when they arrived at the new place and saw what they're doing, hey, like I know this software I've used in the previous workplace, it's free, and like I could, you know, I suspect something like that happened. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I guess what I'm curious about is like obviously at this point in time, like you know, a small amount of developers are using it, and you're kind of like tech support, right? I'm curious, like at some point it hits critical mass where enough people are using it, and you're tech support, and then it becomes quite clear that Kohsuke cannot be tech support for this many developers, right?
yeah. So I think that what that like a few years time period allows me to do is like I could. So we talked about how everything has you have like a one angle, a few new
Yeah,
angles
yeah,
to everything you do, and then one angle into Hudson was like I wanted to build this plugin systems myself. This was I was watching this great success of Java IDEs back
yeah,
around that
yeah,
time
like Eclipse,
when
yeah,
yeah, exactly. And then they have built this whole, it's almost like a plugins on top of plugins all the way down. So like infinitely flexible and like reliable and everything. And it made so much sense. And I wanted to do the same thing on the web app, which is like my main
yeah,
space that I was
sure,
involved. And then so in some sense, I was just curious, like, what if I, like, how would that look like? What if I take this ingredients, successful pattern from here, but in a different domain, and I need to build up all the wiring and the framework and whatnot. But eventually, like, that took time to do it, but that allowed other people to start building on top
yeah,
and then create their own CI system. So you talked about tech support. In many ways, so I was helping users, like the
sure,
mailing
sure,
list and so on. But really, the main people I was helping is the other plugin developers who
yeah.
are helping their users. So it's like a one layer directed. Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the like this the best way to phrase this. I think this is probably one of the greatest innovations of something like Hudson and then eventually Jenkins is like this plug-in concept, where it's like
Yeah.
okay, it might not be part of the core product, but you can extend the product to suit whatever business needs you have, right?
Right.
Like I'd imagine for you, like as somebody who's naturally curious, you probably thought immediately as you were building it, it's like, oh, this needs to be modular in some way where people can build on top of it, because that's kind of how you learned how to build things.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, it made so much sense. Like I could do what I was also frustrated a few times trying to contribute to other open source projects, and they have some
Sure,
ideas about how
sure.
they want to do things, and then I need to convince them that that's this what I'm trying to do is going to help them on the right thing. And I didn't want to do any of that crap. I
So
was
you mean
like,
to tell
okay, this
me,
plugin,
yeah.
yeah,
So you mean to tell
yeah.
me that the open source community can be very opinionated on how you do things? No, no way.
I
Um,
think it's painful. Yeah,
Sometimes, yeah.
yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, there's been occasions where I'll go to a project because I was using it, and I'm like, oh, it'd be great if this feature existed. And I'll go and they'll have their contribution guidelines kind of listed, and I'll say, no thanks. Like, because sometimes if it's more work to like adapt to like the contribution guidelines than it is to actually like write the code for the feature that I want. Like, it's just,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm just lazy, I
yeah,
guess. I don't know.
yeah.
Um, but I know what, like for instance, like in so what I find very fascinating too, like for what it's worth, like I got I my first job in tech was in 2010, right? So that just gives you an idea of like the time, right? So it felt like there was kind of two paths you can take from like a tools perspective.
Mm.
You can go down like the quote unquote, I like to call it the Eclipse Jenkins route, where you would build on Eclipse with Jenkins and you would have Apache Tomcat or Glassfish or something like that, right? Or you can go down the cruise control route, where it's like, oh, maybe you're using Visual Studio, you're building like something in .NET or VB, you know, and you're using Windows and IIS.
Right.
I'm curious, like, you know, as you're kind of working on one side of that, how much influence were you looking at like the other side of the other, like, I guess, build stacks and being like, oh, they're doing this, this is kind of interesting, or maybe even the flip side, it's like, oh, they're doing that and they're not understanding it at all. Because I'm curious, like, obviously you probably weren't thinking of it directly as a competitor, but you were probably thinking of it as like, oh, that's another tool that people are using that is in a very similar kind of area of focus.
Mm. So interestingly, before I went to Sun Microsystems, that my tech stack was entirely Microsoft land.
Yeah.
So like I had a lot of, I guess that if there's one company that I admire and I idolize, it was Microsoft. But somehow I guess the job offer was from the Sun, and I was
Sure.
like, okay.
Sure.
So I did. So I always maintained the health respect, but I didn't. Like, you just don't run into, because as you said, it's like almost like a two incompatible ecosystems, right?
Yes, exactly.
And
Yeah.
I at my level, like I wasn't really paying a lot of attention to what's going on in the Microsoft land, and because like let's say like they came up with I don't know, well, I mean this is kind of chronologically a little bit messed up, but say Link, right? They came
Yeah.
up with this like a very elegant system that could deal with SQL or XML or something
Sure.
like that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like a language level features intertwined. So like I could see that it's wonderful, but like as a lowly engineer, just a part of the totem pole, like I couldn't make something like that happen on the Java side.
Yeah.
So it was, I spent far more time looking at what's coming out in the Java ecosystem from the other open source projects, other
Sure.
vendors, because there I could immediately kind of, yeah. So,
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating to me, like, just and I don't want to play this as like a Microsoft versus Sun Oracle sort of conversation, because I don't think that's very fair. But it is very interesting, like how you see Java and like C Sharp, like they're both used by enterprise customers or enterprise companies to build enterprise applications. But like when you talk to a Java shop or you talk to a .NET shop, their opinions are very, very strong, right? And I'd love to kind of, and I don't know if you feel the similar way. It's like from a tools perspective, we love the tools that we use, and the tools that we don't use, they're trash. Like, I'm just genuinely curious. Is like as you were building, Hudson and eventually became Jenkins, and you would
yeah.
get feedback. Like, how much of that feedback did you actually take in and actually think that's a great idea, let's build it, or something that you had to actually like sit on for a while? Because I'm generally curious as like as the project grew and grew, you probably got lots of opinions on how to like what the next step of it was and how you kind of
Right.
balanced all of that.
Yeah, great point. So the I think I didn't know any of this as I was doing it, but in
Sure, you're doing
retrospect,
it
when
for
I was
fun.
looking
Yeah.
back, yeah. So part of I think what really helped. So you talked about how different people have different opinions, and being able to kind of mind meld to the different perspective and kind of reduce your blind spot is it's actually very important. And then one reason I wasn't doing any of that intentionally, but the reason, because Jenkins was such this ecosystem, extensible system where really it was plugin developers that was developing the CI system, they naturally bring their own industry, their perspective, and so
Sure.
on. So that collective eyeball created a lot of coverage. And that was really, so even though I wasn't actively doing the job of trying to absorb, like trying to reduce my blind spot,
Yeah.
collectively, like we had a lesser blind spot. But the flip side of it is that there are some things that because I wasn't actively seeking out the feedback, the people who give you the feedback is usually like already a serious users, and
Sure. Sure.
so it tends to kind of skewed into one side. So when I was reacting, when the community as a whole was reacting to people who are giving feedback, you end up solving their problem better. So let's say in case of Jenkins, it might be like a bigger, more complicated problem, more at-scale problem, and you're never going to really hear from the newer set of users and like who's struggling. And then so that kind of created, that I think we should have done more active job seeking out, what we are not hearing,
Yeah.
because people don't bother telling us. Yeah.
Yeah. And it eventually gets to the point where Hudson turns into Jenkins, and there's great stories about that. And one of the things I'm curious about is eventually like Sun gets acquired by Oracle, and then you're at Oracle probably for some time. And like at how long, like I'm curious that eventually like you became known as like the Jenkins guy, right? And
Yeah.
I'd imagine that there's probably some great things to that, and there's probably some not so great things to that. I'd imagine as well too, you probably had other interests or things you want to do. Like, at what point in time did you realize this? Like, okay, like I like this area, but like I have other interests as well. And how did you kind of, feed those interests?
Yeah, I have one. I never. Well, I mean, I suppose there's always some days in which like you see this something interesting and you kind of want to spend some time tinkering about it, but then you got day jobs, so or like a
Yeah,
family
sure.
or whatever. So I mean, but overall, I think I never felt for too long that
Like you never got
yeah.
bored? Like I guess that's the question is like because I mean, this tool has been around for 25 years, right? Like or 20 years,
Yes.
right? So it's like and what have you ever gotten like I mean, the answer is yes, you've gotten bored. But like have you ever gotten so bored where you're like, "You know what? I don't want to touch this stuff ever again."
I mean, so what happened after Oracle was then I joined CloudBees, and that was when
Yeah.
the company was still 6 people, and then that company had this amazing trajectory for the next, I guess, the 10 years or
Yeah.
so that I
Yeah.
was there, and then, so it felt like every year it was, different, and because I guess my role, like I had this nebulous title that is CTO, like it
Sure, sure.
could be anything.
What
And
does
then
the
so the
CTO
role
do, right?
wasn't
It depends, right?
exactly, yeah. What do you do? And so it wasn't defined, and like my CEO wasn't particularly defining it for me, so I had to kind of wing it. And so what that meant is like I did everything from at one point in the early days of the company, I was a trainer. So like I
Yeah.
show up into like a conference center, and then I did with a textbook. And I printed that textbook, and I spent the 2 days talking about Jenkins to people, and then it just stuff like that, and that lasted for a while, and then like it changes, and then so it's just never felt like the same job for too long. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was
Good bad.
far
Yeah.
from me. Yeah.
Good, bad, or indifferent. I imagine it's a great selling point for a company too. It's like come learn Jenkins from the guy who wrote Jenkins, right? Like I'd imagine it's a very good marketing tool. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, so you join CloudBees, right? And I think we'll talk about CloudBees like in depth a little bit more in a bit. But so in CloudBees when you joined was very very small, I imagine. So you go from
Yeah.
Sun, Oracle, huge company, to
Yeah.
CloudBees, very small company. What was that transition like? Going from huge top 10 companies in the world to a startup of like 10 people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so obviously, like but toward the end of some, like I started thinking, like thinking about the different next chapter, and then that you usually go through this like a mental exercise of like what it means, what's the pros and cons, and but then in hindsight, like none of those was accurate. So like I was making a decision entirely for the wrong reasons, but in hindsight, that also made me very humbled.
Yeah.
Like it must be still the same to me. Like when I'm thinking about like the important decision ahead or whatever, like we probably are doing it for the wrong reason, so you might as well not think about it too hard. But I guess it's in part it was frustration that the Sun was not doing well. The company was not doing
Sure.
well, and I felt like the thing that I was working had more attractions, like more interesting. But like I'm the only guy doing it, and then in the meantime, the company was spending like 2 people working on making money. So I felt like I should be able to do something more with this than that. And Oracle helped me a lot because it was not that. Sun was still a very enjoyable company to be.
Yeah.
Like there had a lot of freedom and individual engineers got respected. But Oracle was a money printing machine, but it was just
Sure.
like
Sure.
they kept engineers in swim lanes. So yeah, in many ways I really thank Oracle for like pushing my back to make this transition because otherwise I might have not have like it was comfortable enough. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
But once
go ahead.
yeah.
No,
Yeah,
finish what
but
you're saying.
once I
Sorry.
landed on the other side, it was when I got fascinated with seeing and working close with different, I guess, professions. So
Yeah.
that was the first time I was working side by side from the salesperson.
Sure.
Like I was on the call with them, and the kind of things they think about and how they do their work, I could see that they're professionals. Like they bring a lot to the table, just in ways that I've never thought about. And so that was a really like a great joy to discover other types of people, marketing, sales, and like get to know them and how they roll and what can I do to help them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I, so I've gone from a very large company to a very small company. And the first thing that I realized very quickly, like, I like what you were talking about, like having to wear multiple hats in the business, like going to talk to salespeople or talking to customers more. Also, just like how less barriers there are to get things done. That's good, like a good thing and a bad thing. Like, do you remember something like when
Mm.
CloudBees is really small that you're like, oh, there's no way we could have done this in 2 weeks at Oracle, right? Like just just being able to like, oh, let's just do this, and then two people say yes, and then it's done, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's like there's tons of those like marketing events, the programs, like a new thing we launch, or even just yeah, yeah, the shaping the direction of the product is like yeah, we could decide these things, and just, it was very yeah. I really love that part. Yeah.
So, one of the things that I'm curious too about, is obviously you're probably still heavily involved in the Jenkins community, but like how much of your day to day is like thinking about Jenkins?
So actually, the I do not think about Jenkins anymore for the past 5 years or so. I
Okay.
think so. I left the community more or less, and then into the capable hands of people who are still
Yeah.
there. And I talked about the blind spot, right? Like I think there's always some implicit blind spot that you bring to the table, and then so sometimes the best you can do is to let somebody else kind of take it to the next
Sure.
chapter. And they do
Sure.
new things that you didn't have thought about.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
kind
I
of
think
the
that's
point.
that's I'd imagine too for a lot of people that have built like very large tools. Like let's just call it what it is. Like Jenkins, a very well known, very well adopted tool. And I've had enough conversation with people that there is like this weird sort of like connective tissue where it's like, Jenkins is your kid, right? Like it started off as just this very pet project and it turned into this big thing. Was,
Yeah.
you said it's been like 5 years or so since you've been heavily involved. Was there like some challenging moments where you saw the direction of Jenkins going somewhere and you felt like you needed to step in and you decided like, no, this isn't my thing anymore? I'm not saying that like do you have issues with Jenkins today? I'm curious is like, have you run into situations where you wanted to put your opinion on things when it really wasn't needed?
Yeah, I guess maybe like two things come to mind. Like one is there was this one project that was trying to revamp the UI of Jenkins. It was called Blue Ocean, and there was a very passionate product manager, and then his partner in crime, and who they thought this is a worthy problem to fix, and he was completely right. And they had their thought on sort of how to do it, which like for a while, like I thought, I felt like that might not be the compatible with the extensible nature of the Jenkins ecosystem. So I batted a little bit of head in the early on, but somewhere along the line, I realized that I can see that these guys are very passionate, and then they're onto something, and they can probably make a better progress, and then
Sure.
I can do something else if I just let them go.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was I think important realization for me.
Yeah.
So
Because you were
yeah,
focusing on
yeah,
because
so
focusing on
just
this new thing, right? Like you were working at CloudBees and doing some cool things there. So like let's talk about a little bit about CloudBees. So you want to just tell me just really quick elevator pitch, like what CloudBees is and what you currently do there?
yeah, so I think the CloudBees, the way I think of is that the CloudBees provide this like enterprise, it solve this DevOps for enterprise at scale. We're talking about, that's one thing I learned in this company. Is like I used to think, hey, you got the software that's free. Like what else do you need? Just go use it.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
it
yeah.
turns out that larger organization need a lot more help than that. So I think that lot more help, I think, is where we come in. And nowadays, like, we're talking about how the CI is commoditized. So, it could be you could be running these workloads on Jenkins, could be on GitHub Action, wherever. But like in some sense, it's just a low-level building block, and then the
Yeah.
kind of governance and control provided is like a whole new layer. So that's a area that the CloudBees is focused on. So I think that's the elevator at level. I hope that corporate marketing approve. I'm not involved in that.
Well, I think one of the things that I love as somebody that has been in marketing, I
Yeah.
think, all news is good news, right? Like, so if you say something that's interesting enough to get picked up, it's good. It's good for CloudBees.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned something very interesting. We talked a little bit about this before we got started, like the idea of like DevOps or CI/CD being a commodity. So here's a probably a hot question, and you can answer it any way you want. If it's so much of a commodity, why do you think there's so many players in this space?
Are there? Because I don't really think. I mean,
well, you think about it. There's GitHub. Obviously Microsoft has a tool, Azure DevOps. AWS has a tool. Google has a tool. There's Travis CI. There's Circle CI. There's Jenkins still. I guess my point is there's a non-trivial amount of companies that are trying to quote unquote like fix like modern CI/CD. And I don't mean to knock any of those companies. I'm genuinely curious is like, as somebody that's been in this space for so long, why do you think that this is such a very, it's an area in tech that a lot of people have different opinions on, and all those opinions are right?
I mean, the thing with the commodity is like you kind of need it because like, a lot of stuff that you do on top of it, that's built. That's built on, in this case, this capability to run the automated workload and keep a tab on it. So I suppose the vendors might feel like in order to have the whole story, like you can't have this whole house without having the first floor. But most of some of the names you mentioned, as far as I'm concerned, it's essentially like already wiped out. And it's just, in technology space, like nobody really ever dies because it's like a residual.
Sure. Well, if you have customers, you can never die. That's for sure. If you have customers, you're never gonna die. So
but yeah.
I was just curious, and like from your perspective, like what is the area or the competitive advantage of CloudBees? Like, why would somebody want to use CloudBees over one of these other tools, right? Is it a lot of people talk about it's the UI. A lot of people say it's the tooling around the platform itself. Like, what do you think the number one differentiator for CloudBees is?
Yeah, I'm curious what the company's official answer. But since you said this is just two geeks talking, right? I guess that the thing that I always felt is the unique advantage is that there's this. I guess if you think for a moment like a Google, right? Like they have this like Google's way of building a software.
Yes.
It's almost like a highway into building the product, and that really creates a great competitive advantage for them. And I think there in many businesses, it's a little bit like there's obviously not to that extreme, but there's always a room for the central team to drive, build this highway of doing things.
Yeah.
That
ecosystem is a big thing. Yeah, ecosystem is such a big thing in tech, right? Like to the effect we were talking about this a bit earlier, where like if you adopt an ecosystem fairly early on, it's very hard to get yourself out of it. Like we were talking about like the Java ecosystem versus like the more Microsoft tech stack ecosystem. Like not very many companies go from one to the other. They stay in one forever.
Yeah.
And similar to, with some of these other tools like that we've talked about, like the ecosystem is so important. So
but in this case, I'm going further than that. I'm not actually stopping at the ecosystem, which is that you could create your own thing. Because of this like incredible extensibility, and you can make it your own thing. And then that's where I think is what like when you look at what Google is doing in house, like it's not an ecosystem. I mean, it's not just an ecosystem. It's almost like a tailor-built system for themselves.
Sure. Yes, I understand what you're saying.
Stuff like Jenkins, let them do some variant of that.
Yeah.
So to me, that's still unparalleled advantage.
Yeah. Well, here's an interesting question for you. And this is kind of maybe harkening back to like we talked about plugins with Jenkins and Hudson a bit earlier. and you're talking a little bit about that now. It's like, do you think that the best software is software that is very modular? Like software that people can come in and build their own things and there's very low barrier to entry?
Yeah, I think it's like a big the platform type software that the people can use to kind of solve the problem in their own domain in a very adaptive way is like, to me, a key ingredient of the success. So like this, like Excel, for example, like this spreadsheet is so versatile. Like
Yeah,
you could
yeah,
use it in any number of domains, and that's good enough. And it kind of kills off all the small niche competitions. Like nobody builds, well, maybe somebody do, but nobody builds like a home accounting software that, because
sure,
the
sure.
Excel is good enough, like stuff like that. So I think
Yeah,
Jenkins has a similar trait. IDE has a similar trait, right? Like
yeah.
you don't see yeah, JetBrains is a great example. Like they have this like general versatile system that they
Yeah,
cover
everything like
different
yeah,
language
that's one thing about
IDEs.
yeah, JetBrains products is I think one thing that's really great to call about JetBrains products, they all look very similar and they all function in a very similar way. Like to your point, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and yes, it's probably all it's a lot of that's probably based on the fact that it's all kind of built on the same thing. It's all built on top of Kotlin. So like you build these apps a very specific way because that's the way the language kind of is, flows you through. Um, one thing too, like, yeah, I know that a lot of your career has been in the DevOps space, but you aren't technically in the DevOps space these days. Like, you want to talk a little bit about what you currently do at CloudBees?
Yeah, so I guess at some point I started feeling at CloudBees that because as I was leaving Jenkins, I wanted to do something more, and then I
Yeah.
felt like okay, I learned enough about CloudBees. I kind of wanted to run my own ship, and then so that's how I started the new startup on my own, Launchable, and
Yep.
it was in the DevOps space because I guess it is the program space that I'm the most credible, but I wasn't interested in building a CI system. I was trying to build the layer above. So in this
Mm-hmm.
case, it's like more driving the CI process more efficient and automated and more intelligent through AI. So that's kind of how it became. So it's like I think so. I'm still very much in the DevOps space in many ways. I mean, the CloudBees is still a DevOps company. That the angle, the lens that I'm bringing to solve the problem kind of became a little higher. That is
Yeah.
AI, and now and then the AI space kind of exploded with the large language models. So now it is conceivable, and maybe that's how I could eventually, maybe 10 years from now, if I'd be working with AI, but maybe outside the DevOps domain, something else. But that's like just one foot away from DevOps into AI, and then the next time it's DevOps to move into something else. I mean, that's kind of how I see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So that's an interesting, like, you know, because I think of those, I get, and this is probably isn't a fair statement. I think of these on two separate ends of, like, I guess, the tech landscape, right? Like DevOps is very much like talked about, like, it's tried and true, it's commodity, everybody needs to use it. And AI is very much bleeding edge. People are very apprehensive about it. Does it bring value? It's going to replace all the tech jobs. It's not going to replace the tech jobs, right? So, how do you see the marrying of those two things, right? Because like you like from your perspective, you're trying to figure out ways to make like CI/CD and test suites like more sophisticated with AI, right?
yeah,
So like
yeah.
what are some of the things that you're thinking about in this space?
So I mean, I talked a little bit about the Google guys and
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
the system in house. And when I think about when I read some of the I guess the sophisticated systems that they deploy on top of the space CI capabilities and other engineering blocks, so I always get kind of envious and jealous that like it makes so much sense. Like for example, this idea that the neural test, like if we have the machine automatically over how many times we run tests, then like we it automatically suss out the flaky test because like we automatically jack up the number of times we run the new test and stuff like that. And these guys, the large engineering teams, built these systems. So to me, it makes so much sense. And then I knew that these guys can never produce something that the rest of us can use in the general purpose way. And that's, if anything, that's my, my secret sauce. It's like I know how to turn the technology into general purpose, like most of us. And so I just wanted to do those, and that's kind of maybe the starting point. And I felt
Yeah.
like a lot of, we automated this what we can run, but the next layer of automation is like a tuning different systems and the pipeline, how they integrate, what's the frequency of best, etc., etc. And I felt like that's the what I want to automate to the next layer, and that's kind of my current passion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very fascinating space, right? Because I think it's been well established that AI and LLMs are very helpful for like writing code, right? Like I think that's been quite well established, right? I think using like some chat interface or gray text or whatever to like write more code with the help of AI is pretty proven. But like when you think about it from like a DevOps perspective, it's like, okay, well, what is AI actually doing in this space? And you mentioned a couple of things. Like where do you see this continuing on? Like you know, I think one of the key values of AI is to do things at a level of frequency that like humans really can't comprehend and being able to
Yeah,
interpret all
yeah.
of that. Like, like I'm not trying to spill like trying to like leak what CloudBees is working on or anything like that, but it's like what are some of the things you're thinking about like way off in like the next 6 to 18 months range of like how like you can optimize AI or optimize DevOps with AI?
Yeah, I just feel like there's so many low-hanging fruits. Like one of my own pet peeve is like, so my team has a CI system, and then like, it's running on, it's doing, part of the thing it's doing is like a batch data processing, and it's built on top of this AWS EMR. And from time to time, just EMR just chokes and dies, and then like
Sure.
there's a certain known failure mode. And these guys, my team has developed a playbook. Like, if you see this type of error messages, like you just go go to Terraform and then AWS console and kill this instance and run the Terraform again to
Yeah.
kind of bring the new one, and that's it. Right? So something like that, humans are doing today, and I was like, this is so easy application
Sure. Sure.
of the. There's lots of basic fact gathering, the pattern matching, and like little like basically maybe all I'm looking for is a little smarter grep and then and the shell script. And to me, like AI would be perfect for that. And it's
Yeah.
just tons of those in this space. Yeah,
I mean,
the
there is
easy
something to yeah, there is something to say too about like because right now at this point in time, like all of the things that are in the AI space that are being talked about is like agentic work and like MCP stuff. And I think of that as like,
yeah,
okay, I'm thinking about, just in my head, it's like, okay, well, some agentic mechanism that is, maybe it's doing, constant integrations and it's seeing what those outputs are and it's figuring out ways to make the integrations more performant. And like those sort of things are very, very fascinating to me because
yeah,
it's not, we talked about this a bit earlier. It's not something that like you intrinsically like need, but it makes you substantially more efficient, right? And I think that
yeah,
seems to be like at least with you like something that you've always kind of been like interested in. It's like how can like technology make us more efficient?
yeah, exactly. There's like just lots of chores that I don't mind. Like interns. If I have an infinite like a free interns, like what would you do?
Yeah.
That's sort of my current mindset to AI. I guess for better or
Yeah.
worse, I'm not thinking like it's gonna take over our jobs, but it's like, but it could be they are great interns, and then that gotta change. You should be able to, if you have an infinite flow of interns, you should be able to make yourself more productive. So in what ways? It's a kind of interesting question right now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that like something that can do things in the background while you do the things that matter in your job is really, really valuable,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like if you have something that, and then you get a ping, like, oh, by the way, like this build was slow because this section of code, there's like, you look at the hot trace for the code and it's like, oh, like this is doing some memory consumption that's not very good. And then like those sort of things are like super valuable, like, and I think that's where the real
yeah,
implementation of
yeah,
AI is going to make us successful, not like, oh, it's going to replace a bunch of junior developers, right? Like because at the
yeah,
end of the day,
yeah,
like somebody eventually has to like look at all of this stuff that's being done, right? Like you're not gonna blindly like publish everything that's being built. Like even like for like, oh, we're gonna change this pipeline to do this one thing and we're gonna ship it to production. No, you're gonna have somebody who knows what they're doing looking at it, right? So there's always gonna be a need for those sort of folks.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. It's
yeah,
overall, it's just mostly like such a fascinating toy that we talked about how the tinkering is like
yeah,
the
yeah,
root of or how we do things. It's just a fascinating toy to
yeah. I
tinker.
mean, I mean, honestly,
Yeah, I just playing with it. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like, it's funny that you mentioned toy. Like, I remember when ChatGPT came out, and I was showing it to some of my family who weren't very technical, and like they were like enthralled. But it's like, oh, I just put whatever I want into this stupid little checkbox, and it just gives me out information. Like the I like your analogy of a toy is very true. It's like it's just, especially for technologists, like we're like you said, very curious by nature, the tinkering thing. Hey, like what can I do with this toy to like have fun? Because I think at the end of the day, we're all just looking to do interesting things.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then sometimes some of those things we turn out and make a great place like it did for me with Jenkins.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, who knows? Maybe you're working on like the AI version of Jenkins. Who knows? Who knows? I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
Kosuke, this conversation has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of chat with me and walk me through your, your career and talking about some of the different opinions and things that you've seen in the tech landscape for the time that you've been doing it. And, I highly recommend people that if you're not following Kosuke or you want to learn more about what he's doing at CloudBees, like there'll be some links in the show notes to some places that you can find them. I don't know how often you're on X, but like if you do follow Kosuke, you can learn some more too. That is at KOHSUKEKAWA, and there'll be a link to that down below. And checking out CloudBees as well, which is they're doing their own spin on DevOps, and I think it's pretty fascinating. So before we head out, my friend, do you have any parting words?
No, thanks for this opportunity. I guess I don't really do X anymore, but I have my personal website, Kohsuke.org. It's like a good old school book that I probably need to
Yeah,
do a better job updating. That's my primary kind of output exhaust.
yeah, yeah. I think we all. I mean,
Anyway, wonderful. So thank you very much.
yeah. So like, there'll be a link to his website down below as well. So, I want to thank you for joining, Kosuke. This has been great, and I want to thank for the folks that are tuning in live as well as the folks listening in the future. So, my name is Isaac Levin, and this has been Coffee and Open Source, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.